What's going on everyone, welcome back to another quick YouTube video, and today I'm going to be giving you guys a quick Crested Gecko Care Guide 2023. So, Crested Geckos. Number 1, today I'm going to be going through you 5 or 6 different topics that will give you a better explanation and a better understanding on how to keep your Crested Geckos. So number 1. So Crested Geckos are an arboreal species, which means that they love to climb. Crested Geckos, they need a tall enclosure, preferred to a shorter and wider tank. So now I'm going to be going through you with housing. So Crested Geckos, they are geckos that don't need to be kept in pairs to be kept well in captivity, and Crested Geckos, they like to be alone in their enclosure, as that they don't need a second gecko to feel happy with. So if you have a baby Crested Geckos, you can even keep maybe 2 or 3 babies together once they're around a few months old, preferably from when they're young, as they're around the same age, weight and size in comparison, and that with babies they won't have much aggression towards each other. So it's also a good way to keep your geckos together once they're younger, maybe a few days after they hatch from their eggs. Now I'm going to be going through you with step 2. So now I'm going to be going through the substrate, usage, plants and decorations. So if you're planning to set up your new Crested Gecko enclosure, I would recommend these good few substrates. So number 1 would be Eco Earth. That's my best experience that I've had with, as it keeps in a lot of the moisture and also it keeps in the water in for quite a while, as we're using coconut fiber. Once you've misted down your enclosure on the first day, is that the coconut fiber will keep in the water for a day or 2, and once those days have passed, then the water will completely dry out and the soil just turns really dry. And also to keep in mind, if you're planning to use coconut fiber, maybe you should also try it to add some sphagnum moss. That will also keep in a lot of the moisture, and that is also pretty good for using when decorating your Crested Gecko's enclosure. And of course, when you're making your setup, you can also add fake plants, live plants, some hides, maybe a wall background, and just some different nice decorations in your enclosure, as geckos, they love to hide and climb around in your enclosure, and they'll feel safe if there's a lot of foliage and hides in your enclosure. So now I'm also going to be going through with you on when to feed your Crested Geckos, what they eat, and the humidity from your enclosure. So Crested Geckos, they like to eat crickets, dubia roaches, lobster roaches, mealworms, waxworms, and hornworms. They really love crickets and dubia roaches, as with my good experience that I've had with keeping Crested Geckos, and I'd really recommend feeding them to your Crested Geckos, but also just to make sure to gut load your insects before you feed any of your reptiles or amphibians, just to keep in mind. As with gut loading, it means that you're feeding your feeder insects vegetables and fruits so that they get all the nutrients into your body, and then once you feed them to your animals, then the nutrients will be an added bonus, and that it will also be a lot better and healthier for your Crested Gecko while it's eating. Now, when to feed your Crested Gecko. So this really depends on how big your gecko is, how old it is, and how long you've kept it for. So if you have a baby Crested Gecko, they are really young, so they grow really quickly, and with them you should feed them maybe every day around 5 to 6 crickets, just depending on how much they eat. As with baby geckos, you have to feed them a lot more, as they're so young and they need to grow bigger, and that their body will start to develop as they grow. And once you have an adult Crested Gecko, as that they are a lot bigger than babies, and that with adults the thing is that you can feed them 2 or 3 times a week, as comparison to babies, as that they are adults and that they don't always need to eat every day. And also the good thing with crested geckos is that you can feed them gecko diet as you might have seen online before, like Habitat, Rapashi or Pangea. This is also a really good food for crested geckos, and especially with owners or people that might hate feeding live insects to your reptiles. This is a good recommendation if you have a crested gecko or even leopard geckos, is that gecko diet is a consistency of water and powder mixed with maybe insects, fruits, calcium, protein, and all different nutrients all made into powder. And then all you have to do is get a little capful or a bottle cap and then add a little bit of the powder inside, and then you have to add a bit of water and stir it around for a minute. So once it's stirred up well, it should be a consistency of ketchup, and once it's finished like that, you can start to feed it to your gecko. Now, with your crested geckos in your enclosure, you can use a heat mat, which is most preferred for geckos. Is that if you use a heat lamp, they could actually end up burning your crested gecko, and that it could also lose temperature controlment. So if you have your heat bulb in, depends on how much watt it is. I have one that's 75 watt, and that's pretty decent, what I use for my chameleon. And if you use a heat mat, it's good as it's not too hot and that stays around the same temperature as in time to a heat bulb. Is that over time it gets hotter and hotter. So just to keep in mind, maybe to use a heat mat, as that they're also better and that you can stick them on the glass, and then heat from that will go through the glass into the enclosure, making heat, and that the gecko will like to lie on the heat mat or the glass, and then it'll get the heat from that. Now, with the humidity, crested geckos, they are geckos that need a lot of humidity. So what I do with my geckos is that I would spray or mist down the enclosure maybe twice a day or even 3 times a day, depending on if it's too dry or too wet. And I don't want to mist it that it's too wet, everything's dripping down, but a good enough amount. So with the humidity, a crested gecko should have the humidity from around 75% to 85%, I believe, and of course during the night time, maybe if the heat mat's off or the heat source is off, that the humidity and the warmth will drop down to 50%, which is alright, as crested geckos don't get too much harm if the enclosure has been cold for a while. So now I'm going to be going through with handling. Crested geckos, they aren't really reptiles that need to be handled every single day, and with crested geckos, the thing is that they like to be in their enclosure most of the time and spend time alone, but it's also good to maybe handle your geckos maybe 3 times a week, so it gets used to you and it'll be more tame. As with my geckos, I might handle them twice or 3 times a week, as this is because they are tame and that they don't bite. So it's also good to keep in mind that if you want your gecko to not be aggressive or to bite, maybe you should try handling it 2 or 3 times a week. So that was just a quick tip on me giving you on how to make your gecko not aggressive, or maybe if your gecko is already aggressive and bites often, this is just a quick tip on how to make it be less aggressive. So now I'm also going to be going through you on how long crested geckos live and how long it takes for an average gecko to be full grown from a baby. So crested geckos, they are geckos that don't grow too quickly, so once they hatch from an egg, there might be about 3 inches or so, and that on average a crested gecko will take around from, of course, until the day it's born to 2 years or even over to be full grown. And with crested geckos is that when they're full grown, depends if they have a tail or not, is that they might be around 15 centimeters long. That's like the main size that my gecko is, or maybe if it's just bigger, it's also good. And of course, with different crested geckos, every single different one grows faster and some also grow slower. So crested geckos, they can grow faster or slower depending on their rate and how they are kept. So this is a quick tip on how to make your gecko grow faster. Step 1 is that try and have your enclosure warm enough most of the time, maybe if you have a heat mat on. And also step 2 is to try and feed your gecko a lot of protein, as with insects they often grow faster and that they'll also be a bigger size. These are just some 2 quick tips that will make your geckos grow faster overall. So now I'm going to be going through a really important topic if you're planning on breeding your crested geckos or if you want to start the breeding hobby. Now, step 1, if you're planning on breeding your crested geckos, you have to make sure these few things are correct. So with your gecko, you have to make sure that your crested gecko, you have maybe a pair or a trio, and make sure that your gecko is fully grown, should be around 2 years and over, and it should be fully mature. Of course, as that if your gecko isn't fully mature, then your breeding could end up going wrong, or also that if your gecko isn't fully mature and if they mate, then sometimes the eggs might not end up hatching, and that this is also just something to keep in mind. And also, now I'm going to be telling you on what weight your gecko should be. So with crested geckos, your gecko can start breeding from around 38 grams and up. As with females, most of the time they will be bigger than males, of course, because the females will be doing the egg laying. But it also really depends on the weight and how your gecko is eating well. And also, if you're planning on breeding your crested geckos, make sure that the female always has enough food and that you're giving it calcium all the time, whether if it's calcium D3, multivitamin, or the normal calcium. Make sure to always have your calcium for your gecko to eat and to add to its food before you're ever planning on breeding your pair. Now, the good thing is that with crested geckos, you can breed crested geckos in a pair or trio. So this will be of 1 male and 2 females. As if you have 2 males and 1 female, this could also end up to fighting. As if you have 2 males in one enclosure, the thing is that all males, they are also really aggressive towards each other, and that if you have a pair of 2 males and 1 female, is that the males could fight over each other, which could also lead to death, and then leading that one gecko will be able to mate. As if you have 1 male and 2 females, is that the female can mate with the first male, and then once they're done mating, the male will mate with the second female, which will also be good, as that both females will be able to lay clutches of eggs, and that you'll have more gecko eggs than if you're breeding with 1. Now, with enclosure wise, make sure to do this, and to keep in mind is that with adult crested geckos, your enclosure shouldn't be too big or too small, especially if you're breeding your geckos. Is that I would recommend maybe an 18 by 24 exoterra tank, as that these are a good size and that they also have a lot more space. That if your geckos might not end up wanting to mate, that they can get away from each other, or if they feel stressed or scared, they can also hide. So make sure to have a big enough enclosure if you're planning on breeding your crested geckos. And that also with crested gecko breeding, it also looks very aggressive, because with the mating is that the male will bite your legs a few times and then start biting her skin or flaps close to her crest. This looks alarming, but it's a natural thing in the world that with crested geckos, is that they mate aggressively and that the male will bite her a few times even before trying to mate. Just while your geckos are mating, just make sure to stay there for a while, maybe watch them, and if anything gets out of hand, or if your gecko starts biting each other, suppose if your female doesn't want to mate and then ends up biting the male, then you should really separate them, as that they might not want to mate. So I think this is most of the care guide that you should know about keeping crested geckos and overall about breeding them, food wise and lighting and decorations. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate this, and thank you for getting me to 200 subscribers, and I really appreciate you guys watching my videos. Maybe if you guys have any comments or more ideas I can do, or if I can do anything better, make sure to comment down below, and make sure you're subscribed, share my channel, and if you guys have any ideas you want to see, make sure to comment down below and help me to get to 1,000 subscribers. That's my goal, 1,000 subscribers. I will be posting from now on